I'm scared now. I know when he said it, I weakened about 99%. You had me just weaken 1%.
Bill? Can you hold it again?
No, he couldn't.
The Spirit sustains the same relation to the Son in the present universe age, which the eternal Son sustains the universal Father in relation to Havona.
Spirit is just as much a complement of the eternal Son as the Son is a complement of the universal Father.
That's not the statement. I'll find it here.
In the universe, the term universe age in this translation was not in the one just preceding. And I can prove it by Burke's tape. Now Burke's mad now. She's going to try to find
Just
the
right,
book.
so.
Yeah. Well, it is. I'm quite sure it's there, but it doesn't sound compatible to me. In that.
Well, I know where I can find a statement which will support this, but I want to find my exact quote if I can. Oh, here it is, 93, 5, and 6. The eternal Son and the conjoint Creator have, as partners, and through their coordinate personalities, planned and fashioned every post-Havona universe which has been brought into existence. The Spirit sustains the same personal relation to the Son in all subsequent creation that the Son sustains to the Father in the first and central creation.
That's no more what you said. Then I'm a nigger.
In other words, here, in the first creation, Havona, the Father was the initiating creator, and the Spirit was the seconding creator.
So,
In Nebadon, Michael is the initiating creator, and the local universe Mother Spirit is the seconding creator.
it's been stepped down. It's been stepped down.
Yes, now let me show you where this extends. Trinity of Trinities. That is the first statement of a tremendous series.
That's a step down. That. No one would argue with that.
I wouldn't say that.
That statement. No one would argue with that.
I would know one. I would know one.
All right, now on page 1171, paragraph 5. Third sentence, 1171. I got the whole of Appendix 6 I've written here is revolved right around this. The Father-Son partnership has become Son-Spirit. And then Spirit Supreme. Now that to me means that in outer space, the Spirit is going to be the initiating creator, and the Supreme is going to be the seconding creator. And on to Supreme Ultimate. That means to me that when the Master Universe is finished, the Supreme will be an initiating creator, the Ultimate a seconding creator. And ultimate absolute, that's a long way from now. And even to absolute and Father infinite. I use a term for this that I call the processional of initiative. It starts with the Father in the first age, in the first creation. Then, having had this experience, he ceases to be the initiating creator. And he gives this experience to his sons. And now, the spirits become the seconding, supporting creator. So the infinite Spirit neither initiated nor supported, seconded the Havona creation. The infinite Spirit was a passive reality before Havona, not a personal reality. The infinite Spirit came into existence with Havona, right? But now the Spirit's having a chance to participate in the creation of the local universe. And I think in the future, the Spirit will be the initiating creator.
All this is Spirit. All of the words of Spirit that have come out of your mouth in the last 15 minutes or 10 minutes are with regards to the person who did. That's fine with me, and I'll buy it.
I would compare,
Should not be confused with the Spirit of truth or the Holy Spirit.
I would say this, that as the Son is to the Father in Havona, so the Spirit is to the Son in Nebadon.
Right.
It's not a homologous relationship, but it's an analogous relationship. It's not the same, but they're points of similarity.
And there will be another analogous situation step down in the next universe.
That's right. That's right. The Son and Spirit are cooperating not on paradise, but in time and space, through their sons and their spirits.
Back, would you say that, off this argument, thank you, I'm sorry I started, but I'm very pleased to know what.
Let's go back and make a comparison now between Trinity and duality. The basic spiritual circuit is the circuit emanating from the second source and center. The eternal Son is absolute in the domain of spirit. The infinite Spirit, on a pre-mind level, functions as a coordinate of the Son and functions as a spiritual minister. The Universal Father functions coordinately with the Spirit of the Son through his fragments. And the fragments of God are not really spiritual. There's something which is before spirit.
Did they attain spirituality?
They couldn't. They're ancestral to spirit. We have no name for it. A thought adjuster is pure energy. In the sense that God is pure energy. In the sense that in God there is no difference between matter and spirit. The physical and the spiritual couldn't possibly be dual in God. In him they converge. This thought adjuster is a fragment of a reality which theoretically existed before God expressed himself as material paradise on the one hand and as the spiritual Son on the other. When you want to say, what is this pure energy? We can say this side of God, on the one hand is paradise, on the other hand it's the eternal Son. And when you take your ammeter voltmeter and plug it into paradise, you get a reading. And with the same meter, if you could plug it into the Sun, you'd get the same reading. Paradise Monota, the energy of the material isle, and paradise spirit are indistinguishable. They use different names for them. If it comes from the isle, it's Monota. If it comes from the Sun, it's paradise spirit. Now when you get out in Havona, it's entirely different now. Triata and Havona spirit are not the same. They react differently. And the meters you use for measuring one won't register the other. Our Frandelang will register physical energy pressure in Havona, but will be absolutely dormant if you try to measure spiritual currents with a Frandelang. I seriously question that a Frandelang would register Monota. I don't think it'll register either Monota or paradise spirit. This thought adjuster, they call it spirit, a spirit entity, because as it reacts to us and we react to the adjuster, it's a spiritual relationship. But this adjuster doesn't travel over the circuits of the eternal Son. This adjuster travels over the circuits of the paradise isle, just as much at home there as anywhere else. This adjuster is a quality of reality which is before matter and spirit. It's a fragment of God. Is it spirit? Certainly it's spirit. Is it immaterial? Is it unrelated to the physical universe? No, not at all. Because God's related to the physical universe as well as the spiritual universe. And that's why the thought adjuster can travel the paradise circuit. This is actually an unfathomable reality, the thought adjuster, but functions as a spirit entity. Hence is called, to say that an adjuster is a spirit entity is a true statement. But factually, you'll have to qualify it somewhat. You better put a footnote in there. If you want to be technical in your theology and technical in your cosmology. Now, you have three broad spiritual influences. The eternal Son is the center of spiritual gravity. You know, that isn't the way I'd organize the universe. I'd make God the center of spiritual gravity. But he's the center of personality gravity. The Son is the center of spiritual gravity, as paradise is the center of material gravity. In the third source and center, you have a being who is functionally comparable to the first source and center. The first and third source and center, in some ways, are much more alike than either resembles the second source and center. The second source and center is personal and spiritual, yes, and nothing else. Just as paradise is impersonal and material and nothing else. But the third source and center functions right across the board. He ties everything together functionally, just as the Father is where everything comes together in reality. The Father functions pre-personally. The infinite spirit functions in a pre-mind sense, spiritually. The infinite spirit can fragment his nature. The universal Father can fragment his nature. The eternal Son cannot fragment his nature because there is no part of the Son that is not personal. Neither the Father nor the Spirit are the absolute person. The eternal Son is the absolute person. God is the Father of the absolute person. The infinite spirit works functionally in all domains. Materially, mindily, spiritually, and in the domain of personality too.
He can be super.
Yeah, either for the Father or in his own name. Third source personality.
Straighten out something that could be confusing. The Spirit of Truth is the decorator, not the decoration.
No, he's the decorator.
Decorator.
That's right. And of course,
Not the interior decoration, but the interior decorator.
That's right. He beautifies.
Knocking on the door for the job.
He beautifies the soul.
But if you open up the door, he'll come in and
Oh, certainly.
dwell with you.
Certainly.
It's not the decoration.
No.
He's the decorator.
He's the decorator. He beautifies the soul. He's on the outside.
But he'll come in. And
He'll come in. And of course, the thought adjuster says, you dang fool, open the door. This is a friend of ours, see? He's got plenty of conspirators working in his favor on the inside.
I gotta have chronology. I like the house there first, and open once it came.
Yes.
And then the TA occupied it. It might be
Right.
slightly drab, and it could be beautiful.
It sure could be made beautiful. And that to me is the function of the Spirit of Truth.
I like those.
they have an affinity for each other.
Of course, each one is characterized by divinity. There is an inherent synchrony there. There would be an unspoken synchrony between this combined spiritual influence that's not personal and the very personal influence of the group or individual guardian of destiny. They would find themselves naturally cooperating without having planned it. And this would be the synchrony produced by divinity. Because the objective of all is exactly the same. And the summation of all spiritual influences is the Spirit of the Supreme.
Bill, what I got my hand up a while ago, I wanted to ask this. I think you said that the Spirit of Truth is bestowed by all, bestowed some.
Yes.
I don't want to challenge that, but I want to delve into that a little deeper. I wonder if it was not bestowed, or it was bestowed on this planet because we're an isolated planet, and my reason for that is that he had to get the Father's consent.
No, each bestowal son liberates the Spirit, liberates the
But he
Word.
has to have the Father's consent.
Oh, I've forgotten that. At any rate, it is liberated on each world. Now,
And when the Father shall approve, I will pour out the Spirit of truth upon all flesh. That was really the reason why I wondered if it.
I'm sure the Father always approved.
But it's strange that it.
Now, the Spirit of truth differs on bestowal world until Michael's bestowal. And then it becomes uniform throughout the local universe. Because it's liberated by different personalities on
He
each
has
world.
attained his sovereignty, and it's liberated by three different personalities. Up to that time,
Up till that time, each bestowal son determines the quality of the liberation. But after Michael's bestowal, then he determines the quality of its liberation on all previous worlds and on each subsequent world as a paradise bestowal son appears.
I get the
See, the Spirit of truth is not functioning universally in Nebadon. It would not operate on any pre-bestowal world. Only as paradise bestowal sons come to that world. Then they will liberate. They will then liberate Michael's spirit. Prior to this bestowal, they liberated their own version of a potential Spirit of truth. Now they liberate Michael's presentation of the Spirit of truth.
Let's say a limited spirit.
I wouldn't say.
We're running with the governor.
Before mine.
I don't know. It's different. It's a little different. It would be a little different in flavor, I suspect. At any rate, it changes its manifestation somewhat after his bestowal, and then it becomes uniform on every planet. Each planet benefits from this before his bestowal, if they've had a bestowal son. I think of these influences as being helpful, as being a part of the going concern of a human being. A little in contrast to the adjuster, that's an entity and could exist apart from the going concern of the human being as a continuing entity. The adjuster is an influence. It is also an entity and a potential personality. Whereas the Spirit of truth nor the Holy Spirit either are potential personalities. Neither are they entities. They're more like circuits. And yet the papers refer to the Spirit of truth with a personal pronoun. And I think it's because the function of the Spirit of truth is so much a matter of creating in the human mind a consciousness of the Son. And this Spirit of truth would create in any human mind or any other world a consciousness of the Son, of that bestowal Son on that world. Because in divinity, all these bestowal sons would be alike. They are all sons of the eternal Son, whether be they Avenals or Michael. They have that ancestry in common. These are hard questions. The simple ones are the hard ones. It's so difficult, I think, for us to think about these things because in our experience, they're not separable. As we live and have our being, we are a living organism with a seven-adjuvant mind, endowed with the Holy Spirit, invested with personality, indwelt by a thought adjuster, and sustaining some relationship to the Spirit of Truth, having the ministry of a guardian of destiny, group or individual. And you can't separate these things in experience because they all impinge upon us. And we can never remember when they weren't all there. Now, if we'd been around on the day of Pentecost and had known what was coming, then like the apostles, we could have felt a difference and have said, this is the coming of the Spirit. But if we'd lived in, let's say, the province of Kansu in northwestern China, we would have felt a difference and have attributed it to a change in humidity or change in mood or something. Or we just feel a little better or something. We would not have had the sophistication which would have enabled us to identify the cause of the change. Yeah.
Because they had been warned and forewarned.
They've been told it's
again.
coming. And so when it came, they recognized it.
Bill,
What
it's
time is it?
within a minute of a quarter to 6.
Oh my Lord. Turn it off quick, Bert. Where's the time go?
Electrical energy, urge, or
They've gone into a big huddle and he was circling the field. They stood about as long as he could. He says, pilot control tower, pilot control tower. Control tower, pilot, come in. He says, what'll I do? Control tower, pilot, keep circling. So this went on through several more interchanges, and they finally got him out over the North Sea, circling. In desperation, they said, pilot control tower to pilot, come in. One motor has gone out. I'm running low on gas. What'll I do now? Control tower to pilot. Stand by. We have help coming. Roger. Like, he circled. Second motor was beginning to feel a little irregular. He was getting real desperate. And the intercom came on again. A different voice. Control tower to pilot. Pilot to control tower. Come in, control tower. Control tower to pilot. This is Chaplain Witherspoon. Repeat after me slowly. Our Father, which art in heaven.
That was about all that was left.
and then it was dead. Okay, Bill, we're past 7:30.
We're
all
all
yours.
yours.
Let's let Willie kick off by naming something.
No, you all made something.
Well,
I mean, this Willie.
He's talking about Willie over there on the other
I've
side.
been doing real good on it.
Not Willie from Shy, we dig that. Willie from Oak.
Well, that's a little unfair on account I don't know what you took.
We talked about you all.
Well, you named
After we got through talking about you and the cemetery business, there's very little time left.
We finally got everybody to agree to cremation.
Call him Barry. It cost him just as much.
Now we sort of figured you could use the cemetery receipt card and just keep cremating them. You could store those jars there real cheap. Well,
I bet it's going to cost you.
well, the charge of the same.
Sure. I think I can line all of you up. Shell.
No, this is better.
I don't want to be put on a shelf. I want to be buried. I want my ashes put around a
Well,
tree.
we're making progress.
Like, who was it? Kyle, what's his name? The writer? No, it wasn't Kyle. That's the baseball player, wasn't it? Who was it? Kyle, the writer. What's his name? Urban S. Didn't they cremate him and then they put the ashes around the tree at his home? We can't do that anymore. Oh, heck.
You can scatter them, okay. Why?
Well, I just go over to India where they can put me in the river. They had to get special permission.
What if you're not
Scatter
sure?
that old sea captain. Ashes.
He,
Can't do it more up there on
All right,
sure to Norway or Sweden or somewhere.
was,
He's out here in the United
he
States.
said
They
that-
wanted to be back scattered over the state.
This is work.
You're talking about the old sea captain that was on the ship before our question and died. And they had to get a special permit to scatter his ashes on the sea. Well, I'll just...
So what do you want? You go on your Norman?
No, he called on me, but he was thinking that's about 6 months.
I saw no reason when I could see what he was making. He said only that.
Like everything was bloody, that. I said they have a pill now that can get injection. It knocks out all the depression.
They do. You're right.
Oh, I've been taking it since I've been married to you.
Look at Bill's and her on tranquilizers.
Yeah. What a combination.
That's the last
Nice
thing
fellow.
I want.
He has nothing more to say. There's nothing in the conversation.
I want to be cranky.
That's what he's making. Just a matter of wait.
She got over that thing.
Oh, really? Do you have something figured out over there?
No, let's see. In this last week, Saturday Post fictionalized story on Robert. And there was also last Sunday an hour show on Robert. And I'd kind of like to hear the story. And the discovery
This is disturbing. It's a part of the Urantia book I never voluntarily read. The only times I've ever read it is when I've read it in public. I find it very unpleasant reading. I think the lesson to be learned from it is that any one of us might have played any part that was played in connection with the death of Jesus. To me, this is not a group of Jews who killed Jesus. This is a group of human beings who killed Jesus. This happened to be in this particular part of the country. The Greeks could have done it, the Romans could have done it, the Egyptians could have done it. The trial and crucifixion of Jesus, to me, was an experience which the human Jesus passed through as a demonstration of human courage, fortitude, patience, integrity, just plain endurance, which makes it forever impossible for any creature, high or low, to ever say, to Link, you'll never know. Push your dare, Charlie. This was a mean thing to happen. This was an ugly and ignoble way in which to die. This was the equivalent of hanging. It wasn't even the clean death of beheading. This was the dirtiest way to put a human being to death. There acts of those people, I can see myself at my own worst. And I think any honest human being who looks into the mess on the inside of himself can see ugliness, which is so clearly revealed in the cruelty. Not even the clever cruelty, the stupid cruelty of the high priest service, the unfairness of the court, the timorousness of those who broke their own rules and regulations in condemning. I don't think there's any of us who hasn't experienced the confusion and vacillation that Pilate went through. To me, this crucifixion is a great revelation of humanity at all levels of humanity. How many of us have wanted to send for the water to wash our own hands and say, I want no part of this, when actually we can't escape being a part of the thing we are a part of? How many of us have gone along with the crowd and enthusiastically yelled for Barabbas? How many of us have been struck with truth also, even as the centurion was struck? And he said, verily, this was the Son of God. We've all gone to sleep, but we should have stayed awake. We've all deserted a post, as John did, when his affection and curiosity outweighed his sense of duty. He eavesdropped on Jesus in Gethsemane. We've all at one time or another smuggled in swords when it wasn't swords that was going to do the job. Yes, we've been wise on occasion. We've relieved Judas of a bag, perhaps, as David did. You know, of all the people connected, David comes through with about the finest record, doesn't he? He wasn't even one of the 12. He's a man who kept his head. He was a literalist. When Thomas and Nathaniel said to Rodan, even now, he speaks of going to Jerusalem to die, some mystical reference to his future glorification, you can see that they heard without hearing. But David said, save some time. All right, let's get ready for it. So he prepared for Jesus' death. He was the only man who said goodbye to him. Of all families. David said that he was the only human being who said goodbye. That he enjoyed working. Sent for Jesus' family. Ran a messenger center not far from their old camp. Had the finances, the material, money, wherewithal to buy food during this time. Kept everybody in touch with everybody. I've always been so pleased that he had a tail on Judas that last week. He knew every move that Judas made. David was fully aware. The entire process, I think, of religious growth, starting in this life, continuing our unfinished business on the mansion world, is a business of growing away from the animalistic ugliness, from the slothfulness, from the lack of diligence, from the foolhardiness, from the forgetfulness that just Peter displayed. Just a plain lack of guts in facing a frontal attack. I know how these people test out. They say yes when they should say no. It's growing away from these things, from the animal inheritance, which is the inescapable background of every evolutionary creature, such as us. The Bible speaks of it in typical language as the mark of the beast. And this is very accurate language, because we are all marked with the bestiality of having evolved from the animal level. If we get pushed, we push back. If someone snarls at us, we snarl back. It's very easy to adopt the Mosaic code of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's very difficult to move on and to understand the profitability of returning good for evil. This is not just a virtuous thing, this is a profitable thing to do. Because if you return evil for evil, you can only do this with the motivation of hatred. And no human heart has yet been designed which can withstand the corrosive influence and effect of harboring hatred. Hatred will corrode any heart. If there were no virtue in return of good for evil, an intelligent man would do it just selfishly for reasons of self-defense. The crucifixion of Jesus is an indictment of all that's animal-like in human nature. At the same time, it provides an inspiration, I think, and to try to live above this level, the animal level of existence. Stephen caught that. He died, but he died magnificently. And in dying, triggered something in Rabbi Saul, which produced of Rabbi Saul the Apostle Paul. The story of the trial and the crucifixion of Jesus is to me the narrative of the acid test through which the normally proud nature of an able and an intelligent Jew passed without comment, without retaliation, suffering for the most part in silence. This was a great test of the human nature of Jesus. While he was on the cross, I may not quote this correctly, but I can't quote this correctly. He says, "Oh God, why hast thou forsaken me now?" I don't even know what the book tells me. As the human Jesus was dying, he set his mind is a person would lock in place something that's not going to be touched again. And as he died, he repeated these passages, some of which were heard. This is a fragment of one that was heard. This is a hell of a thing to talk about.
Bill, one thing that I could never conceive of, and that was the 11th. David, bless his heart, could understand. Did understand. The 11th, and it is beyond me how, still to this minute, they could have lived with him. Learned, ate, worked, and not a one of them believed the words he gave to them.
Their love blinded them.
How could they not have a small amount of conception, such as David had?
David was a literalist. David believed in Jesus because he was a good mechanic. And he knew how to catch fish. He came to believe in him for other reasons. The way David was put together, David was intensely practical. The others worked with him all the time. They believed he was divine. They loved him. 11 did. Greatly. Their love blinded them.
But they wouldn't believe him literally. They
They couldn't
just
believe he was
wouldn't.
going to die.
And I can't fathom what not one out of the 11.
Thomas and Nathaniel, the two of the most level-headed of the apostles, spoke to the reference to his death, to some mystical reference to his future glorification again.
I think if you were in the book that tells us that they thought that meant he had to die and return to establish the first people.
Yes, in part. But they never thought he was going to die physically, literally, much less the cruel way in which he died.
I had a feeling that there was something mystical about the fact that they could not stay awake that night.
I just think they were plain worn out. He had to meet this last problem alone.
That's right. He couldn't have William helped him in any way as far as the suffering.
With only John Mark as a witness. He had to meet this last problem alone.
That's right. He couldn't have William helped him in any way as far as the suffering.
With only John Mark as a witness. This was Friday. Now when was it? Thursday. John had spent the whole of the previous day with Wednesday.
Held on to his back.
Now, what day of the week is Sabbath day
But how can we be sure which side we would have been on? Wouldn't that have been awful to have been on the wrong side? I mean, we all visualize
Not much
ourselves.
worse than being on the wrong side now, Bill.
Well, at least we didn't do that.
Was it the temple guards or the Roman soldiers, correct?
Temple guard. With some Roman soldiers. I've forgotten. How does anyone remember? I know it was temple guards, but were the Romans with us? Yes, they were together, I believe. Together they guarded the tomb.
Well, in a minor vein, have you thought of the name of the fourth state that lies east of the Jordan? Way back
Batanea.
2:30 this afternoon.
Batanea. Batanea was the tetrarch of Philip.
Which was up the slope and on a plain east of the Jordan one.
You have the provinces Batanea, Galilee, Perea, Judea. So the Decapolis kind of in between.
North of the capital is Denver.
Everybody.
One wigger.
We were history.
We had a tremendous journey this afternoon, Bill.
No, the crucifixion to me is the most horrible story I know. Because I see myself in all those men. And I think any honest man can make that discovery. There were kindly persons, weak persons, wise persons, strong persons, selfish persons, noble persons, animalistic persons. What do you think went through the heart of Rebecca? What do you think Mary thought about? John.
What way did Mary Magdalene come in touch with Christ?
I've forgotten the details. She was a prostitute. So, they gave her treatment. She was teaching. I imagine some of those gals were critical of Mary, and some of the guys were critical of men. Find how to do, you know.
Well, two of the Gospels mention her as having had seven devils cast out.
And that makes her more acceptable socially.
Well,
Explains her.
that's true.
It explains her lapse from virtue.
She was exactly look with her own strength, her own kindness.
Right.
So he's spreading the kingdom on another level by his name.
You see how different our yardsticks are. We evaluate people by what they are. He evaluated people by the direction they were moving in. It didn't make any difference how fine a stationary person was. He wasn't going anywhere. It didn't make any difference how low down a person was who was looking for God. He found fine. And that's why some of the pillars of society were whited sepulchres, and we still have them. And why some of the dregs, they're hungry. I think they're going to make it. Some of the big shots, I think, are going to be very surprised if they were awake to realize they hadn't made it. That's a double subjunctive, I think.
It is important what you are becoming, not what you are.
Certainly.
Well, would you say that it was religious reasons or commercial reasons that high priest wanted him?
They were all bound up together. It was both. Religion was a business. That's that famous line from Gallagher, and she's commenting about the tambourine. Is that religion, Mr. Gallagher? That's a business, Mr. Sheen. This was an integrated business they had going on down in Jerusalem. People were just as much objecting to any change in it, I think, as the Protestant hierarchy objected to a church merger. Because there's going to be a lot of the hierarchy out of work with their mergers. The laymen are in favor of the hierarchy oppose it because they have a vested interest in the separation of different churches. Who wants to lose his job, Bill? I mean, it's easy for us to be altruistic. It's no, our ox isn't being good. But listen, Bishop, if we merge, we're going to have Bishop's League. Yeah.
Bert will now give you a little bit of savings. Now your tax dollars, they can spend it one, two, or three streets.
My daughter did some social work for Cook County, and if you would like to be amused sometime, I'll have her come down and she can tell you what happened to the county dollars. It's tragically humorous about the line of parking law. You can do anything except help people. Well, really. That's about the only thing you're forbidden to do. I think her cutest story was when she was with some gal who had, let's see, she'd had an annual child, each by a different father, but she was missing one for 1956. He was an unbroken chain, and Pat asked her rather facetiously, "You don't have any child more than 19? Oh, shit, I forgot that when he was in Milwaukee. Forgot that one. Okay. The crucifixion to me represents humanity at its worst and best. The whole drama of human survival is portrayed there. All kinds of people under great stress, including one Joshua Ben-Joseph, who loved the most, hence had the greatest capacity to feel stress. You can be hurt. If you love much, you can be hurt much. If you love more, you can be hurt more. Jesus loved the most of any man who's ever lived, I think. Hence, I believe he could experience the most pain of any man who lived. If you don't care for your fellow man, nothing much can hurt. But he loved everyone. The bigger your heart, the greater its capacity for both joy and sorrow. I don't think there's any words in any human language that are adequate to portray the pain and the anguish that this Jew suffered his last day on earth. I don't think that this was Mike Hill writing triumphantly as a divine paradise song, scraping off the barnacles of human problems. No, this was a bona fide human being who hurt real bad, just real bad. That's an Easter sermon now.
As always, puzzles me. The mountain fell. The nature of his master.
day before he died. Which makes me unafraid to tell. No question. Exactly. Jesus had a faith, but it was an open-eyed faith, not a closed. No. He had faith rather than belief. Belief shuts the eyes. You say, credo credemus, and grope. This is presuming on God, something which Jesus never did. He never presumed on God. I don't think he had any illusion about what lay in wait for him in Jerusalem. Had he had illusions, then why did he so contrive on Palm Sunday to throw the Board of Aldermen across between Alderman Senate and College of Cardinals? Why did he throw them into such a state of confusion that they let him alone for his last preaching? Monday, Tuesday. He knew the score. Fully. I think he knew he was going to die, and I think he had a pretty good notion of how. See, every time they'd have enough evil, the Sanhedrin would purge itself and a few more people. So finally they had most of the Pharisees out of the Sanhedrin. They were the liberals. The Sadducees were in the saddle. The dice were loaded. I think, Bill, he felt that he'd accomplished his mission. And I think, like Melchizedek, he didn't want to stay too long. He wanted to turn these people loose before they became dependent on him. He stayed 90 odd years. But he decided to leave long before his physical body wore out. He wanted to leave while Abraham was still mature to carry on. I think Abraham's age determined Melchizedek's departure. He wanted somebody who was prime to pick up the ball and run with it.
He was running with the ball, and he finally passed away.
Abraham?
No, Melchizedek.
Abraham.
He was still alive.
Sure. And he lived for quite a while longer to establish the tradition. No, as you study the crucifixion, don't detach yourself from it. It's a revelation of human nature, and remember, this is our nature. We differ not from these people who played parts at this time. We're the same kind of people. Good and bad. You can see yourself in there. And parts of yourself here and parts of yourself there. And this is a very shaky experience and a very shattering examination to subject yourself.
Yes, you can see yourself as a centurion or a Roman soldier or a temple guard
Or maybe working for the high priest.
working for the high priest, passing out silver. You can visualize yourself as a curiosity seeker. See how this so-called king of the Jews died. Peter alive.
Yes. Yes.
I can't see myself as a religion.
No, but Mary Kay is legitimate.
Mary Kay, see her.
No, a paradise son of God came here, and this is what we did to him. And this was not his father's will. This was the will of man. So that he die in this fashion. In the dirtiest way a man could be killed at that time and place. The meanest way.
I go along with you now, but with most people they would say, but he said, if it be thy will, let this cup pass from me.
your answer book too. It simply was that God wasn't going to intervene and put a stop to the normal course of human events. But these human events were dictated by the decisions of men. These were contrived by free will men who also have free will. God simply refused to interfere as he always does. He never interferes with the free will of creature choice.
Why did the Roman soldier hasten that by stabbing?
There was a storm coming up.
Don't get it over with.
It was a kind thing.
I've often thought that perhaps that particular soldier was motivated by something other than his own punishment.
Jesus was the first to die. They killed the two thieves rather quickly to get the thing over with. The city was in a turmoil. They wanted this to end. It had gone and dragged on long enough. This, my dear friends, is why I don't like to read this passage in your answer book. It's painful thing to read. Because I don't wash my hands of what happened. I say, men did this. I am a man. I could have played any part in these transactions. Because I see my own share of human nature so beautifully, so horribly portrayed in the eloquence of this text.
With all the characters that were part of the crucifixion, I feel that the high priest will by far be more most guilty of all the parties involved.
And the residual members of the Sanhedrin. Golly, just suppose one of those servants protested and didn't kill three. What a beautiful way to die. But not one of them did. Jesus sent John out of the room. He gauged John's temper correctly. John would have been killed there in that room. He remained.
He didn't want them to die. He wanted them to be effective like that. He did those things. He did those things with important.
For 3 years ago, he couldn't afford to have that sort of thing.
He had invested.
Yet James had such short time.
Despite Jesus' warning.
Despite his admonishing him to the nth degree.
You see, it's a cheat-proof school we're going through. The school of experience. Even when you're warned, if you've got the lesson coming, you never heed the warning. Peter heeded not the warning about betrayal. Neither did James heed the warning.
2,000 years later, we're still the same temperament. We don't let anybody tell us anything. We have to learn by our own experience.
Show me a person
Human
with
nature.
show me a person with wisdom, and I will find the scars on that person by virtue of which he attained to that wisdom.
I think that's right.
The story of the crucifixion is what we evolved from, away from, out of.
Still the way you live.
Yes.
Well, when we are compromising with principles, you think we are really evolving at any time?
Not when you compromise the principle. Neither should you be stiff-necked about procedure. That's an arena for compromise. how you do it. This is debatable. What you do sometimes is not too debatable, at least in Jack.
Well, I'm speaking of the business world because in the business world today it's a very exacting world. That's why we have so many yes men.
You don't have to compromise principle, neither do you have to wear your heart on your sleeve.
Now, I have seen men so diplomatic, such good tacticians, that you wondered if at the time you got through with their wringing out the principle, if there's anything left of themselves.
Well, this decision you have to make. In my experience in a large corporation, which extended for 7 to 8 years, once I was incited to criminality, once to larceny. And I managed to avoid the first issue entirely, and I kept quit. The second issue, as far as they're concerned, I took full advantage of. Because again, I don't advertise my ethics. But the GE scandal is nothing new in a large corporation. But you don't have to do these things. Neither do you have to nail your flag to the mast, wrap yourself in the toga of self-righteousness, and scream.
Well, I think people can say no quietly and pleasantly and mean it and get along with it.
Or you can think of an alternative.
Like Bert.
Now, what's Burke an alternative to?
No, she's only used that once in her life. Yes. The rest of them are
Oh, I see. Maybe.
One fellow said you go down the street with business today, with big business, to go down the street with them. It's a one-way street. Now, you can take your choice of having a few fenders knocked off and some hubcaps without having a head-on collision. But it's a pretty tough thing, you know, people to stand up against, unless they have some hope in this, that at least the things that they stand for, they're not going to compromise on principle. They're going to stand.
That's what I like about my business, is because of my eggs are in so many baskets. I can afford to be fired by any one of my numerous bosses. And on a few rare occasions I have been.
You told them to watch their ears like
Yeah. It's like having a lot of oil wells. You have a dry hole now and then. We're pumping out of roughly 600 different oil wells, so we're not dependent on any one of them.
old field can go dry, you wouldn't miss it.
I think in the crucifixion, in that story, you see people meeting, tests, some passing, some failing, some wallowing in their failure, just like a hog wallows in mud. You see faith rising above reason. When David came up to see the 12, the 11, it was only the Alpheus twins that encouraged it. You can see logic betraying faith. As Andrew says, Peter had seen things that weren't exactly real before, which was a fact.
Yes.
You can see the gals kidded by the men. As David says, so far women have seen him. I expect men will see him pretty soon. You can see how dismaying it is when the transactions of one world physically impinge on the observation of another world. That's when the stone rolled away and a bunch of temple guards and some hard-bitten legionaries took off fast for Jerusalem. I mean, they must have taken off fast. And I I can just see myself in the forefront making tracks for headquarters.
Okay, we did.
Because just don't do that. You can see sentiment in high places. Or the chief of the archangels. Asked of the chief executive of this local university permission to take custody of Jesus' body. Many people, including those that are more than human, had grown very fond of that carpet. I want to see the painting which some artist will paint someday. Maybe he'll caption it, "The Last Assembly of the Runners." Was it in the courtyard of the home of Nicodemus, or was it Joseph's courtyard? I've forgotten which. Does anyone remember? Where David met with his runners the last time?
Could have been
Either one. I like to see these runners standing there in semi-military ranks with David out in front of them. The women and Joseph and Nicodemus looking on. And the message which you shall bear is this: the Master is risen. The tomb is empty. They took off for the last time. Who were these runners that ran? Evidently not for pay. Well, it takes quite an organization to set up relays. It'll reach all the way to Damascus in the north, Philadelphia in the east, Alexandria in the west. It's a lot of miles for them to run. More than one relay was involved. When the third or fourth or fifth relay got to Alexandria, I said, yes, we know. We've seen him.
The Bible reports 11 returned.
19, I believe. So many people seem to be asleep to what was going on, even those that were participating in it. And yet, I wonder how many of us sleep through that which is going on around us, which, while less dramatic, is nonetheless important to us. fellow men in great puzzlement at times. They're so busy. And so much of their busyness, as far as I can observe, seems to be about things that are going to be so unimportant 1,000 years from now. I have no way of looking inside their hearts, so I sit not in judgment on them. But from what I can see, I find much to puzzle me.
You know, a great deal of it is not important 10 years from now.
Well, 1,000 years will take in almost all of it, won't it?
Yeah, but in your own mind, can you look back to things you can bring up right now?
Oh, yeah.
This age when you can bring up.
Sure. I remember when it concerned me greatly that I couldn't dance with Charles. I can't think of anything I'm less interested in right now. The whole trial and crucifixion of Jesus make it forever impossible for any human being to complain very much about anything that could possibly happen to him. We all will die, each in our time. I dare say that none of us will experience the onset of death accompanied by such pain and anguish as this Creator Son went through. Or more properly speaking, as Joshua ben Joseph went through.
Well, Bill, in this day of drugs and things, that's probably true, but in the past, I believe so. I've seen many, many death drugs.
Not as emotionally painful.
Physically, maybe, psychologically, and emotionally, I don't see that.
Well, no, there's a limit to the physical pain the human body can feel. At that point, the fuses go. You lose consciousness. I know of no such limits to anguish of an emotional and intellectual nature. And that's what really hurt Jesus, I think. You see, he loved he loved each of those men. He wanted to help them. He wanted them to grow. He loved them as God loved them.
Well, of course, he recognized the fact that he had to give up. In order to leave this planet.
Yeah, true. But in part his attitude would be the attitude of a parent, being thus put upon by his own children.
Do you believe that he felt like he had brought these 11 as far as their understanding of the
I think he felt he'd reached the optimum point, so not the maximum, but the optimum. You know, it's like in a piece of market research. You can get 90% of the information you want for $10,000, and to go 92% would cost another $10,000. There's the break point. You settle for 90%. That's the optimum. I'm sure if he'd stayed another year, he could have done a little more. But in his judgment, he had reached the optimum, which is always less than the maximum. No, he deliberately went down there and let this happen to him. The proof that he knew how to conduct himself otherwise is given in the story of his flight to Phoenicia. When he didn't want to be caught, he wasn't catchable. Even when he went to Jerusalem, when he didn't want to be taken, he wasn't takeable. Not until he got ready. He was waiting for them when they came. He wasn't running. We said, who are you looking for? He greeted them.
Bill, there's a contradiction there, though, about the comedian. He was capable of leaving this planet witut being put to death.
Yes.
And he said that he would follow his father's will.
Yes.
And the father permitted him to be taken as he was.
Yes.
Now, to me, that's a contradiction.
No. Not in the least. To me. Jesus simply elected to meet death in a rather terrible form.
Why?
For the same reason that he picked a rather messed up planet for his soul. It wasn't required that he come here. He could have come to a very normal world. He experienced birth, human existence, died.
Rode in a Pullman all the way and died.
Absolutely. He could have come to a world with an established Eden, with a center of the planetary prince. There are plenty of such worlds. In fact, most of the worlds are that way. There's only 37 in this part of these local universes that are messed up this way. No.
Yeah, I've talked. He has had orders.
He could have gone to
Now, I don't.
possibly any world in Abaddon. There's only about, must be less than 100 worlds like ours. They're messed up with rebellion. Out of 3.5 million. But he picked this world. He picked this world because he has the spirit of adventure in his personality. Because how could he ask an Avenal son of paradise to do a piece of dirty work when he is a Michael son of paradise, an elder brother of these Avenals, would duck it? I think he picked
He didn't want to.
I think he picked the meanest assignment he could. And I think he accepted the meanest death for the same reason. Simply to show men how to die.
Inhabitants of planets are aware in the manner in which he was put to death on this planet.
I think the whole local universe is. Well, I think the planets that have communication, the ones, the advanced planets know about it, I think.
They don't have a very high opinion of us.
I think we're locally infamous. We're known as the world of the cross. I think Urantia enjoys a rather unique infamy.
Probably
Well,
the dirt in the world on lots of planets.
Well, sort of like a dead end, kid.
That's the
The ones that survive
There's
are going to be our SOB.
yeah. But then again, you know, it goes on to tell you that you have certain privileges and attributes about being an icon.
Oh, yeah. I come from a world like this, too, but it's tough down there. I think attitudes toward us vary, depending on the level of the individual with the attitude. Wilma, men determined how he died. It was God's will that he died.
I know. Men determined how to die, but...
And God refused to interfere.
So,
Because God wouldn't
Jesus
interfere
said
for
he shall
you.
be put to death because God didn't interfere. He took him off his planet without him having to meet such an instance
That's
as
right.
death.
He wouldn't do that for you, and he wouldn't do it for me. The only time they do interfere is never for the person. They might for a venture.
For a race.
They kept Peter alive. They intervened twice in Peter's career. But in the end, when he'd accomplished his mission, nobody stopped them from crucifying Peter.
See, they crucified him upside down.
He has to be
What the story is.
because he didn't want to die. Said that he wasn't worthy to die. Chauncey that said he didn't believe it. Chauncey said he didn't crucify. Said he thought that might be me.
Why?
Bill, while you're on the infamous situation that we find ourselves in, will you reiterate for us the uniqueness of your rancho and the several aspects of our uniqueness? Quite a few of them.
Well, it starts out, we're an experimental planet. We're a unique planet in that we have a pre-red race, the Andonites. We're a unique planet in that the 6 Sangig races all mutated from a single family. We're a unique planet in that the planetary prince came here much later than a planetary prince would usually come. Normally, a planetary prince might have been assigned in the days of Andon and Fonda, in which event his corporeal staff would have outnumbered the early Andonites, because there are 100 of those.
Well, that's a cinch then, isn't it?
Yeah.
2 to 100.
Outnumbered. Let's say there's Andon and Fonda have 5 children, there's 7 human beings on Earth and 100 members of the corporeal staff.
And they come that early on lots of planets.
It could have been even, as it says, even, it could have been assigned even in the lifetime of Andon and Fonda.
What they was 50 million years late,
500 million.
500. No, I just weren't all there.
What's a zero between friends?
Bill, I want to ask you one.
Yes, sir.
The only one answer I ever heard of coming from a planet of this nature was Tabamantia.
The only one we know about.
Do you know where he came from?
No, except
You don't even know he come out of this universe, do we?
we don't know.
The only one answer I ever heard of coming from a planet of this nature was Tabamantia.
The only one we know about.
Do you know where he came from?
No, except
You don't even know he come out of this universe, do we?
we don't know. We know he's related, time-wise and space-wise, to the author of the paper, The Problems of the Lucifer Rebellion. The Problems of the Lucifer Rebellion is written by a mighty messenger of experiential survival in the first rebellion ever to take place in time and space. Tabamantia grew up on a world that was isolated in that same rebellion. This mighty messenger was like one of those on Jerusalem at the time of Lucifer's fandango. Tabamantia is a critter that came along like we did later, but before the rebellion had been liquidated. It's the #1 rebellion in all time and space. It could have been in any one of the super universes. We don't know. Going back to your question, Clyde. We're unique because we're one of 37 planets that were involved in the Lucifer Rebellion. We're unique because we produced 2 unusual races here, the Andonites of evolutionary origin and the Nodites of non or modified evolutionary origin. The Nodites were the progeny of andonic germplasm, which had been reconfigured while living in the bodies of the corporeal members of the Prince's staff and being subjected to whatever influence the system life currents have on such germplasm. And we can understand that because germplasm will reconfigure if you bombard it with X-rays. You produce mutations or monsters or what have you. The Nodites are unique. We're unique because Adam and Eve defaulted and left a leaderless, violent race. I don't think we're unique in that we had Melchizedek receivers or Verandadek regions. I think that's common practice, at least on rebellious planets or planets before planetary princes come. We're unique, though, in that there are only 6 other worlds in the local universe, besides ours, where a Melchizedek functioned as a corporeal being. This is not the first Melchizedek mission as a corporeal being, but it's number 7. And that isn't very many in 3.5 million worlds. And then we're unique because this is Michael's home world, where he came. We're unique as an inhabited world because there is a divisional headquarters of the archangels here, which normally would be on Jerusalem.
Embellish that one.
It's in the book. Michael moved it here.
Well, there's,
He broke
the
the
archangels had set up temporary communication.
They moved their circuit here when they moved the divisional headquarters here.
At what time was that?
After Michael was sold.
Oh.
He moved it. We're unique in that we have not only a planetary prince, but a vicegerent planetary prince. Jesus of Nazareth, a human being, is planetary prince of Urantia. It's an honor which he accepted as a man. This would hardly be an honor to a creator son, but this would be a supreme honor to a human being. As a man among men, he accepted the title planetary prince of Urantia. The Melchizedek who lived in the days of Abraham is vicegerent planetary prince of Urantia. We're unique in that our period of warfare has persisted into a scientific era. I strongly suspect that war on this planet is very unusual in the history of planets in our local universe. Other human strains are just as warlike, but they achieve a global government under the Adamites, which ends war, and it's after that that their scientific era dawns. War is bad enough in the bow and arrow stage, but we've carried it far beyond the bow and arrow and satellite stage.
You think we're about through?
In one way or another.
That's why I asked.
I think we're either through with war or else our civilization's through. I'm not sure which is which.
Well, I'd rather think that maybe we're about through war.
If some damn fool doesn't set it off.
Well, I can't see a civilization like this. Civilization destroyed.
Neither could the Romans.
We therefore are unique in that we have outrun in our secular directions far
Yes.
our spiritual. Isn't that unique too?
Yes, this planet is getting
so far out of kilter.
This planet is beginning to get the tools of civilization in our day. I think someday when they write planetary history, they will speak of the dawn of the scientific era as being synonymous with the unlocking of atomic energy. And what we call the Industrial Revolution, they will describe as the later Middle Ages. You know, the modern period tends to move up. The people in the 12th century AD in Europe called themselves moderns. Each generation calls itself modern. I think that this someday will be described as the later days of barbarism. Yes, I do. Toynbee has the kindest and yet most accurate description of us. He calls us man in process of civilization. I like that. That's kind. It's factual, too. That's the uniqueness of Urantia.
Well, man in process of civilization is ever since the colored races came to this planet. Man has been in process of civilization.
The progress has been glacial for a long time. Today it's relatively rapid. I think in the olden days, Wilma, 400,000 years ago, in 10,000 years you could hardly measure any change.
and all of a sudden?
No, in about 1830,
Lockdown.
we broke the oat barrier. And in about 1945, we broke the sound barrier. We broke the oat barrier with a locomotive. We broke the sound barrier with a jet.
Bill, number 8, only 6 other planets where Melchizedek did what?
Bestowed himself in the likeness of human flesh. We've had Melchizedek observers and receivers. I don't think that's unique. We have Verondadek observers who sometimes act as regents. I see nothing from my understanding of the papers. I think that's fairly standard practice. I think Verondadek can intervene at any time on any planet and do. They simply interpose higher wisdom, higher authority for an interim. They supersede the planetary prince. I don't think our resident governors general are unique. I think the other isolated worlds in Satania have a similar setup. Now, this all means to us, first of all, Michael did no more for us than any Paradise Son could have done. An Avenel Son could have come here and done just as fine a job. Because if this were not true, then God would be playing favorites with the world. It said no planet is ever in such a jam that it requires a Michael Son. These Paradise Sons of God bestow themselves with the flawlessness of paradise perfection of divinity in their bestowal. The only difference is, if one of Michael's Paradise brethren had come here, he would have said to his followers, "He who has seen me has seen the eternal Son of Paradise." That's the only difference. Since he doesn't spring from the Father, he would not have presumed to reveal the Father. But he would have revealed the absolute revelation of the Father, which is the eternal Son. There's a technical difference, but spiritually, I don't think there's any difference.
Now, you said pre-red race.
Andonites and Autofanta were pre-red. The red race is normally the first race to evolve. And as I read the papers, I think it evolves and is the only race of men for quite a while. Then the next colored race evolves independently of the red race from animal stock. And so, for either 3 or 6 such evolutions, depending on whether it's a 3-race planet or a 6-race planet. On this planet, we have a unique opportunity to develop faith, which is put beautifully in Jesus' words when he spoke to Thomas, saying, "Thomas, you've perceived, you believe, this is well. But blessed are those in the ages to come who believe, though they see not." We're missing most of the adjuncts to faith. Suppose in the Levant, Eden still existed. And there Adam and Eve and the Urantia function as the social, ethical, moral arbiters of human society. These people don't die. You go and see them, you come back and you talk to your great-great-grandfather, who's a little more than 200 years old, and he tells you that his great-great-great-grandfather saw them there. This is believing. I've been there for the last 500 years, in the observation of your own family. And I tell you that God is real. To the east of Eden is a second city, compared to which Eden is a Johnny-come-lately. This is the city of the prince. The city has been there for 500,000 years. And there are the successors, the corporeal successors of the original staff of the planetary planet, who can tell you the history of this planet and the traditions of this world for the last 500,000 years. And this is where the Urantia book would be portrayed and taught in the schools of theology, in the schools of divinity, maintained in Eden and in Dalmatia, the city of the prince.
We might have already been a land of light and life with that dog.
We might have come considerable ways. These things we don't have. We don't have a unified racial structure on this planet. We get racial problems here that many planets do not have. Consider the dilution of Adam's blood. When the Adamic race was diluted down to where the mass average of the progeny were from 1/6 to 1/8 Adamic, then they stopped calling them Adamites, and they call them Andites. When that got diluted significantly farther, then they call them white. The Andites don't live anymore. They had a concentration of Adam's blood, which we don't have on this world anymore. 1/6 is about 16%, 1/8 is about 12%. Andites range from a low of 12% to a high of 16% Adamite. What are we? Significantly lower. 4% perhaps, 5%, 6%, 2%. Now, if we are 2 or 3% Adamic, what do you suppose a Negro would be like who was 50% Adamic?
That's what I was like.
Yeah, 50%. Now, that was the original plan. We were intended to be 50% Adamic. We have problems to solve with fewer resources. Hence, I think greater charity will be given to Urantians. This whole thing is done in proportion. Jesus' comments on Palm Sunday indicated the largest single contributor to the temple treasury at Jerusalem was a widow who put in an extremely small copper coin, which happened to be all she had. Qualitatively, this was the largest contribution made to the treasury that day. Jesus said, of the teacher more is expected of the pupil, of the master more than the servant. All through his teaching, I get a feeling of proportion and the relativity of challenge. He never said to the Alphaeus twins, be good shepherds and feed my sheep. He said, boys, be good fishermen. To each of the 10 at Galilee, he presented a challenge which they were competent to meet. Peter the shepherd, James and Judas Alphaeus the fisherman. I think they will be charitable when they add up our assets and liabilities, when they take off a P&L on us, because we've had less to work with. I think survival is tougher from this world. Hence, those who survive are tougher. And I symbolize this by thinking of the United States in 1790. We've been at peace for 9 years. You have a mission. And this mission happens to be operating out of Fort St. Louis. And you've got to get word to the French in New Orleans. You're going to send one man. And you have in your military command a very charming Philadelphia, from one of the finest families in Philadelphia, whose daddy fought with Washington. This chap's a Harvard graduate, and college graduate. He's just the nicest, best-read man. Fine, cultured. You've also got in your command a raw-boned Kentuckian who doesn't know which fork to use, who butchers the King's English, who just isn't couth, and not too sanitary either. But if you want a guy to go to New Orleans, I'm pretty sure I know which man you'll pick to go to get to New Orleans against obstacles. You pick the Kentucky, the frontiersmen. We are frontiersmen. We're not couth, we're not too sanitary, spiritually speaking. We don't know which Morancha fork to use, but we're tough. And that's why they say that when they've got tough jobs up yonder, where you got to go pretty much on your own gas tank without leaning on anyone, they pick critters like us because we grew up not leaning on anyone except each other. Who we got to lean on down here? Just each other. It's all too tragically true that when the blind lead the blind, they better watch out for excavations. That's the uniqueness of your ranch. You want to know something? I wouldn't change places with any citizen of any world I know anything about. This is my home. I like the challenge. I mean, if you're going in the Army, you might as well be a paratrooper. I mean, go all the way in the Army. Now, Wilma was just very upset. Right, right. She used to be here and where else?
Yeah, I want to go zip when I go.
We used to kick
Afraid I'd have to be very, very, very old with life on this planet.
Well, you'd just be a planetary phenomenon. You'd be a planetary phenomenon.
I'd be another unique feature of this planet, I'm sure.
We're not going to have that experience, but we'll have a chance to see many planets that are settled in like life. Don't you know when you get citizenship status on Jerusalem and get your Morancha sea legs, get oriented, you're going to get vacation. And I think you'll be able to go down. You won't be able to command transport because you're not commissioned on official business. But I think you'll be able to list yourself as standby and wait list.
Hitchhike?
Yeah. And imagine they have regular procedure there. And if they've got a seraphim that's going to such and such a planet, and if she isn't taking somebody, she got room for you. And so they'll call you up. Maybe you worked it out with your boss to take your vacation on kind of short notice when you can get transit. Maybe you want to go to Penobscot and see what a world was like where a rebellion failed, where the big shots threw in and the people wouldn't go with them. You know, there's a gal there, Eleonora. I'll bet they got some very interesting monuments they've erected there. I'd like to see those. You can travel all over this local system. And I think somewhere in our local system, some of the older worlds must be settled in like life. Because our system is at least 5 billion years old. The youngest systems in Nebadon are that old. Or if you haven't got any in Sedania by the time you get to Norleshadek and Edentia, then you'll have clearance to visit 100 times 1,000 worlds. You got 100,000 worlds to draw from. Or if it's in proportion to Nebadon, 35,000 worlds.
Suppose we're going to queue up?
Yeah, I think some of them there'll be long. I bet you on Jerusalem there's the darndest wait list to come to your ranch. You know what I mean?
What's
passengers, the
Service
biggest
and-
transport. So,
Two your size or one van size? I think just one person.